Dara, so good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the new safety features, because a lot of incidents over the past few years have really highlighted the need for more Uber driver and passenger safety. So tell me about these new features and why you're instituting them now.
Well, when you have 15 million trips on a daily basis on a global platform such as ours, the vast majority of the time everything's okay, but once in a while something happens. And we as a company leadership got together last year and we declared that safety is going to be the top priority for us as a company in 2018.
Why?
And frankly beyond. Because safety is universal. Because anyone who's at home, whether they're home or going to a ball game or going to work, you want to feel safe. And we believe that we can use the power of technology and the innovation that we have brought to bear to revolutionize transportation to make Uber the safest transportation platform on earth. And what you're seeing is very early in the game, but features such as a 911 button that's location aware so that 911 dispatch can react to anything that might happen incredibly quickly is a huge determinant in success or failure. Trusted contact tracking where you're going, improved background checks, and the continuous background checks as well, both available for riders and drivers. And now some of the new features that we're introducing, privacy, for example, you may not want a driver partner to know the exact address at which you were dropped off because that's something private. Location information is incredibly important. We mask that. We mask your phone number if you ever speak to your driver partner. And then we've introduced some really cool whiz-band technology where we know where you started, we know where you've ended, we know how long your trip should take, and if for some reason your trip is taking longer than it should, we will send you a notification to make sure that you're okay. And in some cases, we can actually detect an accident if it ever happens, to again make sure that both the rider and the driver partner are okay too.
Yeah, you're mining a lot of data off of the driver and the passenger's smartphone in terms of speed, where they're going. You know, how do you assure that a user's data is safe?
I think it's a great question. We made very significant investments in data privacy. And we do know a lot of data about you, payment information, location information, but the religion at Uber is that we're going to use that information for you, the rider or the driver. So for example, in the morning now, my Uber app knows that in the mornings I go to work. So it's one click. I'm sure you see it's one click. We have an idea of where you're going, but ultimately we're not selling data. We don't have any advertising, etc. So ultimately the use of data is to make life easier for you, to make it faster, to make it more affordable, and now to make riding on an Uber as safe as it possibly can be.
So you're celebrating your 1-year anniversary.
Yes, I am.
As CEO
I made
of Uber.
it.
You made it, so that is very true. Now people want to know, are you still sticking with your timeline of an IPO in the back half of 2019? Because your new CFO, who will start in a few days,
he's starting next week. Yeah,
he says he's not on board yet, though, for a 2019 listing.
I would expect nothing less of Nelson. He's independent-minded. He's rigorous. And so far, he's on the outside. So I think I absolutely want Nelson to come in. And I think that when he sees all of the work that the teams are doing, I think that he will agree that we are ready for a 2019 IPO. There's a bunch of systems work that's going on, financial work that's going on. The company's big enough. The company's incredibly important to the world, and we have some incredibly talented technologists out there. So I think we're going to be ready, but I absolutely want that stamp of approval from our CFO.
Yeah, there's always a but. Lyft wants to also IPO in March or April of next year. And the thinking on the street is if they IPO before you, they basically take up all the IPO capital in the market. Are you concerned?
I'm not concerned. Listen, this is, Lyft and ourselves are part of a transportation revolution. This is about ultimately ending car ownership. The transportation market is a $6 trillion business. You may think that Uber's big, but we're 50 billion. We account for less than 1% of miles driven. And really what ourselves and Lyft are trying to do is to break apart all the use cases of owning a car. You own a car to get to work, you own a car to pick up the kids at school, you own a car to get groceries, etc. And we're building out services to solve each of those use cases and ultimately making it unnecessary for you to own a car. And we think there are plenty of companies who can be a part of that revolution. And I think investors are going to line up behind us and Lyft. I certainly hope they are.
So are you guaranteeing a 2019 IPO?
Oh, there's no guarantee. You don't know what the market is doing.
80%?
I can guarantee you that we'll be ready. And we want to, and hopefully the markets will be ready for us.
So you talked about how big Uber is in the ride-hailing services. Some say you own 73% of the market. Given that the US president has talked about an antitrust situation with the big tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook, do you think that big tech companies like Uber might be regulated in the future?
Well, we're regulated. Listen, we're regulated now,
right?
We work in every single city, et cetera. We look at the market as a $6 trillion transportation market. We're a tiny, tiny, tiny part of the market. We account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road.
Right.
So I think Uber can be ultimately 20, 30 times bigger than it is today.
So no fear of being broken up at all?
No fear of being broken up. And listen, I think that ultimately regulators are our partners. You know, we work with, we operate on the streets of New York City. And while we may not agree on everything, ultimately we think that we as a transportation service are incredibly valuable for every city around, and that ultimately we have to be partners in building this solution together. It takes dialogue. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't agree, but we think that the opportunity is enormous, and we think that there's a need for riders and drivers all around the world for our service.
Yeah, well, you talked about working with regulators, which is something new that you've instituted at Uber. 1 year as CEO, and some say that you were brought in to turn around a company whose reputation was tarnished by an erratic founder. What advice would you give to those looking at, say, Tesla's example right now in dealing with an erratic founder? What can they learn from Uber's case?
You know, however you want to characterize those founders, I'd say that those founders have accomplished incredible things. No one in life is perfect. I'm not perfect, and I couldn't accomplish what those founders did, but companies get to different stages in their life, and I hope that I'm the right person to lead Uber forward. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm going to make plenty of mistakes, I guarantee you, going forward, but this is now a new stage for our growth. This is growth in partnership and growth in responsibility, doing the right thing and putting safety above all. I think if I can execute behind that roadmap, I'll be fine. And ultimately, you know, I think that innovation comes with sometimes chaos and sometimes disturbance, and innovation can't be clean all the time. And you know, Uber's been a revolutionary and an innovator, and we hope that will continue to be in the right way now.
Well, talking to our audience, you know, there's been a lot of concern about political bias in Silicon Valley. You're a giant, you're a respectable voice in Silicon Valley. So I have to ask you this question. President Trump thinks that there's a liberal bias in Silicon Valley with big tech companies. Employees at big tech companies have said that they feel that their conservative voices have been silenced. Do you think that's true?
I guarantee you that your wait times for your Uber are going to be equal, whether you're Republican or not, or a Democrat. I don't think, listen, I think that biases, if there's a bias, I don't think that it is a bias on purpose. We as a company, as a leadership team, have been trained on biases as well, and there are some implicit biases that you may not be aware of as a person. And I think awareness is step one. So I don't think that there's any bias on purpose, but if you have a bunch of like-minded people building product, you may get product that's shaped in one way or the other. That's why, for example, from our standpoint, we want to have more women, we want to have more underrepresented people working as engineers and product people, and have representation at all parts of our company so that the products that we're building reflect our driver partners and our rider partners and aren't with any biases that we're not aware of. So listen, we're human, all of us are vulnerable. I think that all of these companies are trying to do the right thing, but they've got some learning to do, and I think the way that they operate going forward has to change.
One last question, and this is about, again, turning around the company.
Sure.
And you've talked about some of the difficulties in your first year. What do you think has been the toughest for you to do in order to change Uber's culture and to repair the reputation?
Well, I think that the culture work is never done. That we have stated new cultural norms, celebrating differences, doing the right thing, continuing to make big, bold bets. But we're the beginning of this journey. We're 1 year in. and we want everyone at the company to be singing off the same tune, I think that we're far ahead of where we were, but the work is never done, and I'm not going to rest until it is.
Dara, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.